Stop. Do not move past this moment. Not yet. Because what you're about to hear is not health advice. It is not a wellness tip. It is not another video designed to give you a 5-step protocol that will solve in a week what your body has been carrying for decades. What you're about to hear is the truth about what has actually been happening inside you. The truth that the mainstream medical system was never designed to tell you. The truth that the wellness industry has been carefully avoiding because the real answer cannot be sold in a supplement bottle. The truth that the people closest to you have been quietly afraid to acknowledge because acknowledging it would require all of us to look honestly at how we have been living. Your body has been speaking for years, sometimes for decades, in the form of fatigue that no amount of sleep can resolve, in the form of pain that no scan can fully explain, in the form of conditions that arrive without warning and refuse to fully heal, regardless of how compliant you have been with every recommendation you have followed. Your body has been speaking, and almost no one in your life has been able to translate what it has been trying to say. Until now. Today, drawing from the revolutionary and unflinching work of Dr. Gabor Maté, physician, trauma specialist, and the author of the book that fundamentally changed how thousands of practitioners now understand the relationship between mind and body, when the body says no. I'm going to walk you through what is actually happening when stress and emotional suppression begin their long, patient, quiet work of breaking down the architecture of your physical health. This is not metaphor. This is not motivational language. This is not the soft suggestion that maybe sort of in some indirect way emotions might be connected to illness. This is the documented, repeatedly demonstrated, biologically real mechanism through which the suppression of authentic feeling becomes over time the precondition for some of the most serious illnesses human beings face. And if you recognize what I am about to describe, if something in your body shifts as you listen, if something behind your eyes quietly says, yes, this is what has been happening to me, and I never had the framework to understand it, then I want you to do one thing. Type the words, you healing, you feeling, in the comments below. Not as a trend, not as a performance, as a declaration, a conscious acknowledgement that you're ready to stop pretending your body has been overreacting and ready to start listening to what it has been trying to tell you for a very long time. Type it when you feel it. And keep listening, because what comes next is going to change the way you understand your own health. Now let us begin with the foundation. Because without the foundation, what I am about to describe will sound either alarming or implausible. And it is neither. It is simply true. And it is true in ways that have been carefully documented across decades of research that the mainstream conversation about health has been slow to integrate. Dr. Gabor Maté has spent his career inside one of the most important questions a physician can ask. Not what disease does this person have, but why does this person have this disease? What in their life, in their history, in their daily experience, in the architecture of their nervous system and their emotional patterns has created the conditions in which this particular illness could take root? This question, simple as it sounds, is treated with suspicion in much of conventional medicine. Because conventional medicine, for all its extraordinary technical achievements, has organized itself around the body as if it were a machine that occasionally breaks down for biological reasons that have nothing to do with the life the body has been living. Maté has spent his career demonstrating that this model is incomplete, dangerously incomplete, because the body is not a machine. The body is the lived record of everything you have experienced, everything you have suppressed, everything you have felt and not allowed yourself to feel, every relationship that has shaped you, every environment you have had to adapt to, every emotion that was permitted and every emotion that was forbidden. The body remembers what the mind has been trained to forget. And when the mind has spent decades suppressing what was inconvenient, what was dangerous to feel, what was unacceptable to express, the body becomes the location where that suppressed material eventually surfaces, not as memory, as symptom, as condition, as disease. This is what Maté means when he says that what the mind suppresses, the body expresses. It is not poetry, it is physiology. The stress response system in the human body was designed for acute, short-term emergencies. A predator appears, the system mobilizes, the threat passes, the system returns to baseline. This is how our biology was supposed to function. Brief activation, followed by long periods of safety and recovery. What our biology was not designed for is what most modern adults are now living inside. Chronic, low-grade, continuous activation of the stress response, often without any clear external emergency, simply as a function of the relentless pace of contemporary life and the deeper, quieter, more pervasive stress of living disconnected from authentic emotional experience. When this chronic activation continues for years, for decades, for an entire adulthood, the body begins to break down in specific, predictable, measurable ways. The immune system becomes dysregulated. Inflammation becomes chronic. The hormonal balance that governs nearly every aspect of physical function becomes increasingly disrupted. Sleep degrades, digestion suffers, cognitive function declines. The cardiovascular system bears the weight of constant activation. And eventually, somewhere along the line, an illness appears. Not randomly, not as bad luck, not as a purely genetic event that descended on you without context, as the long, patient biological consequence of a life lived in suppression of authentic feeling. Here's what most people and even most physicians do not yet fully understand. Let me walk you through what is actually happening inside you when stress and emotional suppression become chronic. Because once you see this clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you finally have the framework you need to begin doing something real about it. The first quiet destruction is happening inside your immune system. Your immune system is not an isolated department of your body that operates independently of your emotional life. This is one of the most important findings of the last several decades of medical research, and it is one of the most clinically ignored. Your immune system is in constant two-way communication with your nervous system, your endocrine system, and the deeper emotional regulation centers of your brain. What you feel, what you suppress, what you carry chronically without resolution, all of it is registered and translated into immune system behavior. Maté discusses this extensively in his clinical work with people suffering from autoimmune conditions. Conditions in which the immune system, the very system designed to protect you, begins to attack your own body. He has observed across an enormous range of patients a consistent pattern. People with autoimmune conditions are frequently, though not universally, people who learned very early in life to suppress their own anger, to prioritize the needs of others, to avoid confrontation, to maintain the appearance of niceness and accommodation, even when their authentic response would have been resistance, refusal, or protest. This is not a moral judgment. It is a pattern observation. The person who cannot express anger outwardly, who's learned to swallow it, manage it, redirect it, deny it, eventually has a nervous system and an immune system that turn that suppressed reactivity inward. The body, denied permission to direct its protective aggression outward in the form of healthy self-assertion and honest emotional expression, begins to direct that same protective aggression inward, against its own tissues, against its own organs, against itself. This is the biological logic of many autoimmune conditions. It is not the only logic. There are genetic factors, there are environmental factors, there are infectious triggers. The picture is complex. But the emotional and stress dimension is consistently present, consistently relevant, and consistently under-addressed in the standard medical conversation. If you have an autoimmune condition, this is not your fault. Let me say that clearly. You did not cause your illness through emotional weakness. You did not bring this on yourself. You adapted. the way every child adapts to the environment they find themselves in. You learn to suppress what was unacceptable to express. And the cost of that adaptation, decades later, has shown up in your body. The healing is not blame. The healing is awareness and the slow, patient work of learning to feel and express what was suppressed for a very long time. The second quiet destruction is happening inside your cardiovascular system. Your heart is not a metaphor. When we speak about the emotional pain breaking the heart, when we speak about carrying too much weight in the chest, when we speak about heartache and heaviness, we are describing experiences that have direct physiological correlates. The cardiovascular system is exquisitely sensitive to chronic emotional stress. When you live in a state of sustained low-grade stress activation, your blood pressure stays elevated, your heart rate variability decreases, the inflammatory markers in your blood vessels rise, the architecture of your vascular system gradually changes in ways that increase risk for the conditions that eventually account for an enormous percentage of adult mortality. Maté has spoken extensively about the personality patterns that are most strongly correlated with cardiovascular disease. People have learned to suppress emotional vulnerability. People who present a strong, capable, competent exterior while internally carrying enormous unprocessed stress. People who do not ask for help. People who do not allow themselves to fully feel grief or fear or sadness, because feeling those things was somewhere in their history dangerous or unacceptable. These are the people most likely to experience cardiovascular events that seem to come from nowhere. Heart attacks in people who appeared healthy, strokes in people who seemed fine, sudden cardiac events in people whose external lives gave no indication that anything was wrong. The external life gave no indication because the internal life was being constantly suppressed. The body denied permission to register what was actually happening emotionally, registered it in the cardiovascular system instead. This is not mysticism. This is what decades of research in psychocardiology has been demonstrating with increasing precision. The heart is not separate from what you feel. The heart is in many ways the most honest record of what you have not allowed yourself to feel. The third quiet destruction is happening inside your digestive system. The gut, the intestines, the entire digestive tract is so deeply connected to the emotional regulation centers of the brain that researchers now refer to the gut as the second brain. The enteric nervous system, which governs digestion, contains more neurons than the spinal cord. It produces an enormous percentage of the neurotransmitters that regulate mood, including serotonin. It is in constant bidirectional communication with the brain in ways that mean your emotional state and your digestive function are not two separate things. They are one thing expressed in two locations. When emotional suppression becomes chronic, when stress becomes the baseline rather than the exception, the gut suffers in specific and predictable ways. Conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, chronic indigestion, food sensitivities that seem to multiply over time are frequently the digestive system expressing what the conscious mind has not been permitted to process. Maté has worked with many patients who carry significant digestive conditions, and consistently he finds underneath the physical symptoms a pattern of emotional history that helps make sense of why the gut, specifically, has become the location where the body's distress is being expressed. People who learned to swallow what they could not say. People who internalized what should have been processed externally. People who have spent their lives unable to digest, in the metaphorical and then in the literal sense, the experiences that life has placed in front of them. The healing of chronic digestive conditions in Maté's framework almost always involves attention not just to diet and supplementation, but to the emotional patterns and unprocessed experiences that the digestive system has been carrying on behalf of the conscious mind. The fourth quiet destruction is happening inside your nervous system itself. Chronic stress and emotional suppression do not just affect specific organs, they reshape the nervous system at a structural level. The brain itself changes. The areas associated with stress response become hyperactive and structurally enlarged. The areas associated with emotional regulation, with executive function, with the capacity to be calm and present, become functionally weakened. This is what trauma researchers describe when they speak about the dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, the system that was designed to oscillate gracefully between activation and rest, becomes stuck in patterns of chronic activation, with reduced capacity to return to true rest, even when external circumstances are calm. You experience this as anxiety that has no specific cause, as an inability to truly relax, even when you have time to relax, as difficulty sleeping, as the constant low-level tension in your body that does not release no matter what you do, as feeling wired and tired simultaneously. This is your nervous system telling you that it has been operating in survival mode for too long without enough opportunity to return to genuine safety. And Maté is very clear about something important here. This is not a personal failure. This is not a matter of willpower or discipline or attitude. This is biology. This is what happens when a nervous system is asked to carry chronic stress without sufficient periods of authentic safety and emotional release. The healing requires more than meditation apps and breathing techniques, though those can help. The healing requires honest engagement with the emotional patterns and life circumstances that are continuing to activate the stress response. You cannot meditate your way out of a life that is constantly triggering your survival system. You can only begin to address the deeper sources of the activation. The fifth quiet destruction is happening inside your relationship with your own body. This is the deepest and most painful of all the destructions, and it is the one that almost no one talks about. When you have spent years or decades suppressing emotion, performing wellness, ignoring symptoms, pushing through fatigue, dismissing pain as inconvenient, your relationship with your own body becomes a relationship of estrangement. You stop hearing your body's signals. You stop trusting your body's responses. You begin to treat your body as an obstacle to be managed rather than as the home in which your life is occurring. Maté describes this as one of the most significant casualties of modern life. The loss of the basic intimate connection between a person and their own physical experience. Most adults have lost the capacity to know in real time what their body is feeling. They cannot tell when they are tired until they collapse. They cannot tell when they are hungry until they are starving. They cannot tell when they are overwhelmed until they have already broken down. They cannot tell what their body wants because they have spent so long overriding what the body wanted, that the channel of communication is degraded. This loss of body awareness is not just a personal inconvenience. It is the precondition for almost every chronic illness pattern that develops over time, because illness almost always announces itself through subtle signals long before it becomes acute, and the person who has lost contact with their body cannot hear those signals until the situation has become serious. The healing of this estrangement is the most fundamental work a person can do. Because without the restoration of authentic contact with the body, no other intervention will have lasting effect. The body must become trusted again, listened to again, allowed to speak again, believed when it speaks. This is the work that no supplement and no diagnostic test and no specialist can do for you. This is the work of returning home to the physical reality of your own life. Now I want to ask you something. If you are still here, if you have stayed through every word of this, if something inside you has been quietly registering recognition as you have listened, I want you to do something. Type the words, "you healing, you feeling," in the comments right now. Not as a small thing, not as a performative gesture, but because the act of naming what is happening inside you matters more than almost anything else you could do. Maté teaches that awareness is the first and most essential condition of healing. Not technique, not protocol, not a perfectly optimized supplement regimen. Awareness. The simple, profound act of looking honestly at what has been happening in your body and your life and naming it, without minimizing it, without dramatizing it, without trying to make it sound better or worse than it actually is. Type it now. You healing, you feeling, because you are. Or you are beginning to. Or you're at the very edge of being ready to begin. And the act of saying so matters. Dr. Gabor Maté, after a lifetime of sitting with people whose bodies finally said no to lies that had been suppressing too much for too long, arrived at something that I want to leave inside you today. Not a doctrine, not a prescription, something more honest than either, a recognition. The recognition that the relationship between your emotional life and your physical health is not optional. It is not a side topic. It is not something to address after you have handled the more important biological factors. It is the central terrain. Because the body you are living in is not separate from the life you are living. The body you are living in is the daily record of every emotion you have processed and every emotion you have suppressed, of every truth you have spoken and every truth you have swallowed, of every authentic response you have honored and every authentic response you have overridden in order to keep the peace, maintain the relationship, perform the version of yourself the world expected from you. The body keeps the record. And eventually, when the record becomes heavy enough, the body insists on being heard. This is what most chronic illness in Maté's framework actually is. The body finally insisting on being heard. The body refusing to continue carrying what the conscious mind has refused to feel. This insistence is not a punishment. It is an invitation. An invitation to finally listen, to finally turn toward what has been suppressed, to finally allow yourself to feel what you have been carrying without permission to feel it, to finally live in alignment with what is actually true for you rather than what was acceptable to the environments you had to survive. The body wants you to live. The body has always wanted you to live. It is the suppression that the body cannot sustain. It is the suppression that decade after decade becomes too heavy for any biological system to keep carrying. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the version of you that suppressed everything inconvenient. Not the version that performed health while carrying chronic stress. Not the version that ignored every signal your body sent until your body had no choice but to escalate the signals into conditions that could no longer be ignored. Who you truly are. The person beneath the suppression. The person who feels what is actually true. The person whose body, when finally listened to and trusted and honored, knows how to begin the long, patient work of repair. That person is still in there. That person has been waiting quietly and without bitterness for you to be ready to come home right now, in this moment, by listening to this, by allowing what has been said to land somewhere real inside you, by acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that the conditions in your body might be saying something that deserves to be heard rather than just managed. You are beginning to come home. Type you healing, you feeling in the comments if something in this met something in you, if something in this gave language to what your body has been trying to say for a very long time. Subscribe if you're ready to receive more of this kind of honest, grounded, deeply human truth about what it actually takes to heal. Share this with one person whose body has been carrying too much for too long. One person who needs to hear that their illness is not random, that their fatigue is not weakness, that their conditions are not punishment, that their body has been speaking, and that the conversation can finally begin. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not failing at being healthy. You are carrying decades of suppressed truth, and your body is asking you, with increasing seriousness, to finally start listening. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And the body, when honored, when heard, when believed, is the most reliable guide back to that person you have always been. You are beginning. Right now, you are beginning.